There's nothing you can slather on your skin that is going to fix like 75 pounds of weight loss.
How quickly people are losing weight on this. I don't know if there's any device that's going to tighten your skin quick enough or build enough collagen or elastin quick enough to overcome that.
They're a candidate for the surgery, but I'm not sure that they're going to get like the best possible result given their age or whatever else is going on. And then they'll shock you that they look amazing, heal super, super easily. It's probably the biggest news in medicine in the last year was the murder of Brian Thompson. It's like, that's not something that we've seen before.
Yeah.
In the past. What's your take with all of this?
Well, I mean, the more I read about it and hear about what's going on with, Luigi and like his manifesto and all these things, I mean, it's a little bit scary and alarming for these companies because I think for so long they've gotten away with essentially, and this guy's mind, exploiting, the everyday person, when it comes to health insurance. And so I think the big concern with these companies is like, are more people going to take action like this guy did? And I would be scared if I was in a position like that. And again, I don't work for insurance companies. We deal with insurance companies quite a bit. I know you do as well.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more than I do. And, they're trying to run a business, but I think a lot of just Americans are fed up, and other countries don't run health insurance the way that we do.
Yeah.
The way it's privatized and all that. But what are your thoughts, dude?
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw it, I was, initially super shocked. And then after thinking about it for 10 seconds, I'm like, I am not surprised that something like this hasn't happened sooner. When you talk with patients and seeing how difficult sometimes it is for them dealing with insurance companies, how complicated the system is. I mean, it's messing with their health. So it's scary for patients. And in a place that we have a lot of gun violence in general, I'm surprised that something like this hasn't already happened. The thing that was super surprising to me is, and I don't know if it was the same in kind of your news feeds and algorithm, how much content there was coming out being like, he's a vigilante that was justified in doing this. This is something that, can help kind of rebalance the system. I didn't see a ton of kind of heartbreak and outreach to Brian Thompson's family. I mean, the guy was married and had kids, right?
Yeah.
And, murdered in the street in New York City. But I didn't see a lot of concern for that. A lot of people were like, well, this is kind of what you get for, how you've been messing around, which, I mean, that's super duper cold. And I guess, it's on social media, it's on the internet. Everybody's, a keyboard warrior. It's different if you were talking to somebody in real life, I'm sure. But a lot of dark humor and, people making crazy T-shirts and all sorts of things on that, which it feels sad. But,
I don't think no one ever, it's never justified to take someone's life, regardless of how bad you hate their company they work with or work for. I mean, you just can't condone any type of violence, especially cold-blooded murder like that.
And when you put people in these kind of situations where they feel helpless or powerless otherwise against a very large company, if they feel empowered to strike out, it's like these are the things they feel like they truly have, control over, which, I mean, it's certainly scary for the people working in those systems. And I guess we'll see more that comes out on that story as we move forward, just time-wise as things come out in the news and when it's time to go to trial. But, I'm sure
I think
we'll
right
have
around
the
that
background.
Yeah, around the same time, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they had come out with their change to anesthesia pay. And it seemed like horrible timing for them, and they quickly retracted that. But that, that was in the news for a couple of days, and that was around the same time. And I don't know if that had any effect with what happened with the CEO of United Healthcare and the murder, and then them quickly retracting that. Because, I mean, that whole thing is controversial as well, shorting, not paying for anesthesia during a surgery while a patient's asleep. I mean, that just boggles my mind. Man. And it just, in some way it is reflective of the whole mentality of the healthcare system, the private healthcare system in the United States. It's like, that's how they look at it, like cutting, corners and shaving off money. Again, nothing's ever justified to do harm to another human like that. But you can see where, like I said, people get fed up, and unfortunately stuff like that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I was the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield when that news was coming out, I'd be like, well, maybe we should reverse that game plan for
immediately
anesthesia. Yeah. And that whole thing with anesthesia for them, they were talking about just capping the length for certain types of surgeries, right? That they wouldn't pay over a certain amount of time. So if a surgeon was taking longer than like the national average, they may cut them off time wise. It seems shocking. I mean, some people are just slower than other folks. Sometimes the surgery takes longer, and just, if the surgery is taking longer because it's more complicated, the idea that you're going to turn off the tap 75% of the way through and then it's going to be on the patient afterwards just seems wild to me.
Yeah.
Especially as profitable as the companies are.
There's so much unpredictability in surgery, and like I said, you could do the same surgery 1,000 times and you may have something where something happens and you have to adjust and adapt. And that's part of being a surgeon. That's why we don't have robots, at least up to this point in our lives, doing these surgeries, because there's so many nuances and things that can happen and intraoperative complications you have to deal with. And to feel that pressure, and all that, like I said, and to dump it back on the patient. I mean, it's just, you're pitting again, I think, the doctor and the patient against each other, because the doctor's just trying to get paid for the work they're doing. The patient's now having to pay for it out of the pocket, and they're paying insurance companies. I mean, it's just like a lose-lose for the doctor and the patient.
Now, as a physician, you don't want to be staring at the clock when you're taking out someone's appendix, right? If it's complicated or hard, you don't want to be staring at be like, well, I've only got 5 minutes to finish this up, so I probably should rush through. That doesn't feel great. You don't want your surgeon really looking at the clock while they're working. You want them to be working at the pace that is safe for them, and then when the case is done, the case is done. That's the way it goes.
Exactly.
It's one of the tough things that we do in our position, right? It's like you try to plan dinner or picking up your child from school or basketball games or whatever it may be. It's like if you're operating the entire day, it's like sometimes those days just run longer, and you can't plan for that. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, can't cut corners for sure.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see more about that as it comes through the news. So what do you think the biggest change for plastic surgery going to 2025 is going to be?
I'm really excited. I think, in breast and body contouring specifically, we can talk about phase 2 in a minute, but I think some of the biggest changes coming out are, the 6th generation breast implants by Motiva. They were FDA approved at the end of this year in the early fall. So they've only been out for a couple of months, but I really do think it's going to change the market here. I think it's going to open up opportunities for a lot of women, with the latest technology that they have of their shell, where they actually have a paper they did with MIT showing that the surface technology they have, the 4 microns, has the lowest rates of inflammatory reaction from the body. I mean, the body just doesn't attach to these. And so people who are worried about immune problems and the body really trying to quote unquote reject these is a lot lower than our current 5th generation implants. So I think it's going to be exciting to see how that changes this next year, because I think up till right now, this year, Motiva is really just trying to figure out, get the word out, get it out to plastic surgeons. And so I think next year, a lot more surgeons will have them on hand. I've been using them. I love them. My patients have loved them, and they look phenomenal. And so I think that's exciting. And the second thing for me, I think there are a lot of other technologies coming out that are less invasive. So for patients that are, again, for body contouring, there are things that are like energy-based, whether it's not plasma, but there's now heat-based tightening devices that are coming out in the market. I think there's some other exciting devices. So I think it's going to be a really, really good year for breast and body contouring for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about, because you've had Motiva implants since basically they came out, right? It's like how many sets of implants from Motiva have you done already?
So I've done, I think, over 20, maybe 20, close to 25 sets. I have 4 coming up on Friday and a couple tomorrow. So I've done quite a few now. And so my experience with them it's been awesome. I think it just, obviously you've used Natrel Cohesive, you've used HSC 107s, you've used Mentor Boost, all those. These are definitely a more cohesive feeling gel. I would say on the order of like a Natrel Cohesive touch, almost even more so. But then they also have the ergonomics, which is a little more like viscoelastic, a little more kind of stretchy feeling. But I've liked them. I think it's a little more, it's different putting them in with a funnel at first. You feel like a little bit more firm. I wouldn't say stiff, but a little more firm in through the pocket. And I think it's super important what I'm learning is you really just got to make a very defined pocket. So I always use sizers for these cases. I never overstretch the pocket and just throw an implant in because, you know, you can have malrotation and stuff with any of these implants nowadays.
Yeah. So I know that you haven't had a lot of long-term follow-up because it's only been a couple months that they've been out. Mm-hmm. What changes have you made to your practice as far as either aftercare or during the procedure that you feel has been different than either with Santra or Allergan?
You know, I think I kind of anticipated that these implants would be coming out, and I had heard and learned a lot about them. I had been to Costa Rica back in this summer and got hands-on and saw them. And so I'd kind of been adjusting my practice already in terms of, you know, one, like how I'm dissecting my pocket. I've been kind of doing that for the last 2 years because I've switched to a subfascial approach in the last 2 years where I don't dissect the muscle. And if you look at Motiva, a big part of what they push is, you know, breast preservation. And they have techniques that are not FDA approved in the US yet, but they have devices that actually essentially help preserve all the breast structure. And so in my mind, I was like, I love that concept, and I've been trying to work on that on my own for the last 2 years. So I've been doing subfascial, don't go under the muscle, it goes, you know, above the pec muscle, attempting to preserve the ligaments of the breast, so not over dissecting. So that's, again, I was talking about using sizers for all my cases. And then I personally use P4HB, I use Galaflex for lower pulse support. The reason I'm doing that, and I've done every Motiva case, so over 20 something cases with a Galaflex, because I really want to see our pocket control. I'm trying to change one variable at a time. Yeah. I think at some point I'll do subfascial with Motiva without the internal bra, see how it goes. But I really love the results I've been getting with the combination of a gummy implant and the Galaflex. So those are the changes that I've made.
Yeah. And with the Galaflex, I feel like I almost never am sad that I used it, but there's plenty of times where I don't have it, where I wish that I had it. So for me, it's like I'm trying to have it for as many cases as I get patients to go for it, because I feel like you get so much better support long term. You're not seeing the implants drop quite as much. You're seeing, the IMF, the fold underneath of the breast is better defined. Your scar stays put. I mean, the days of having to guess where the implant was going to land and having to put your scar lower to get it to settle into the fold, it's like those days are gone with Galaflex, which is a thing of beauty to just have that control. Because back in the day when you had your implant drop and had your scar come out of the fold up onto the breast, it's not a great look. So going subfascial, using the Galaflex, it's just an absolute game changer as far as augmentation is, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think, predictability. I just gave a talk on a couple days ago to a bunch of surgeons in Taiwan about, because they just got P4HB Galaflex in Taiwan. So I was kind of sharing my experience. And I think, if we step back and as plastic surgeons, we say, look, okay, obviously we want the best for our patients, right? But how do we come up with the perfect breast augmentation, And I think we can have like a dream list of like things, like obviously like 100% predictability, no bottoming out, no scars, no complications, perfect, happy patient, right? Like there's all these things, no damage to any structures of the breast. Like there's this wish list that we have, but what can we actually achieve? And I think as we look through that list and we talk about these like newer implants like Motiva, we talk about P4HB support, we talk about new and more innovative ways to really approach the breast in terms of putting an implant in. I really think, again, it's exciting in the next couple of years to just see it transform the United States, how we go about breast augmentation. And I think it's really fun for us as younger surgeons who are like really wanting to adopt this and do it. I think we can be at the forefront of that, but also see our colleagues do it at the same time. I think it's going to be better for all of our patients around the board.
Yeah. I'm also really interested to see what the capsular contracture rates for the Motiva are going to be. I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting having a shell that's not as inflammatory as the shells that we see on other implants, with the expectation that you're going to have a lower capsular contracture rate, which we already see significantly lower rates than we used to, say, 10 years ago, but it's still a significant issue. So if that's something that we can continue to minimize, it's just such a tough thing to deal with down the line that if you can knock it out of the gate and not have to deal with it, it's great. Don't want to love that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their 4-year data now, because the FDA trials they had to do in the U.S. before they became approved earlier this year, I mean, their CapCon rates, I think they had over about 500 patients in the study. It's less than 0.5% at 4 years. So it's extremely low. I do know, I talked to one of the surgeons who had one of the CapCons. They said that was a patient who previously had CapCon with a different implant. And so I don't think there was a pocket change or any internal bra used. But so there's that. But yeah, I think the rates are really low. I think you look at the rupture rates, they're extremely low. And they have their data for, I believe they've put about 3 million, maybe even more implants worldwide over the last 14, 15 years since these have been out. And their data is very promising as well for that long period. So yeah, I think just that technology that you're talking about, and I think a company that is trying to find better ways to improve products for women, I think I'm all for it. And I think it's good for companies like Allergan, AbbVie, for Tiger Aesthetics, now Santra, for Johnson Johnson, Mentor, right? These companies that are here already approved in the US, like it's kind of like the ball's in their court. And I don't know what research they've got in the background, but I think it helps elevate the level of what we can do for patients now.
And I think it's certainly good to note that for patients. It's not something brand new that we don't have any long-term data for, which certainly makes it much more comfortable, because I feel like most of the time when a lot of these things come out, we see them first here, and you're like, well, I'm the first person using this. We're going to find out years from now if this was a good idea or not. So at least for this, it's not new. And I'm pretty excited about it because we just got approved to carry it in our practice today. So
Awesome.
our account's
Congrats.
open, and it's something I can use moving forward, which is pretty exciting. I'm looking
Let me know
forward
what
to
you
it.
think. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So for me, I think the other big thing for 2025, right? If 2024 was the year of Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, all of these people who are losing significant weight, now we're going to start seeing them because they've lost significant weight. Now they're going to have extra skin, and extra skin typically means plastic surgery. So I think that all of these people losing on this weight, we're going to start seeing a huge uptick on people who have lost like massive weight loss amount of weight, but without bariatric surgery.
Yeah, I mean, significant amounts. One thing I have also seen, and maybe it's less common, and you have to take this into consideration, because like you said, I think if you look at 2024, it became much more available, and because it was compounded, like pricing-wise, it became more economical for a lot of the general public to have access to these medications. But still, even with maintenance dosing and things, I mean, it's a significant cost to some people. And so there is this rebound effect for some patients if they get off of it. If they're not on a maintenance dose or they're on a low dose, I have seen patients bounce back, and so there definitely is that has to be concerning for some people. But if you think looking forward, Eli Lilly and these other companies that are now making more and more of these medications, they're making ones that are even more effective. So probably in 25 we'll see something. There
And
be some
pills instead of shots.
Exactly, oral, right? So like a lot of people don't want shots. People want to take a pill, and if the pill's more affordable, then you're going to see people stay on it, I would think. And so I do think you're going to see even a bigger wave of what you're already talking about, right? Like all the skin laxity and loss of fat. They're going to have a lot of extra skin. And so I think it's just going to be this surge over the next couple of years as those medications are more available, more cost.
And when we talk about rebound for weight loss for people on these types of medications, I mean, that holds true for bariatric surgery, right? It's like people can get a sleeve, lose 100 pounds, and then gain it all back if they've learned nothing from the entire process, which is why when you go to see a bariatric surgeon, they're very inclined to have you lose a little bit of weight first to teach you better habits and make sure you're capable of it. So the same thing happens with this. It's like if you are not planning on staying on it forever, which we clearly do not know what the long-term effects of being on Ozempic for decades, right? We don't have that data. We'll find out if that's a great idea or not. But if you haven't learned new habits, you'll be able to eat through it when you stop. And I've had patients do that where they've lost 30 pounds because they were getting cheap Ozempic from Mexico, and then that dried up, and then they put the weight immediately back on. But we're going to be seeing people who were just never capable of losing a significant amount of weight at much later in their life than we're used to seeing. So I feel like, these golden year glow ups, menopause makeovers, whatever you want to call them. People being in their 50s and 60s are going to be getting body contouring due to massive weight loss, which is, it's a tougher surgery at that age for us. I mean, the patients, as long as they're healthy, still do well, but it's just more difficult for us because their skin texture and skin type is just not as good as it would have been if they had it done when they had lost that kind of weight in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I do, and I've talked to my PA Shelby about this. She's done a lot of research looking into this, but it's something that we're trying to do a trial on ourselves at our practice. But, I think the skin, like you mentioned, the skin quality of someone in their 50s or 60s is not the same as if you're in your 20s or 30s. But I think these medications also, theoretically, hypothetically, also affect the collagen, elastin, and your tissue. And so the quality of your skin actually potentially is not as good as it was off the medication. So that's my personal theory. We're testing it out now, but actually I'll talk to you about it after the thing on here. We should talk about it.
it's going to be secret.
Research
we got to keep it from everyone.
I can't tell you what we're doing. But yes, no, I think it's, important to think about those things. But yeah, I think just looking ahead, for people that are wanting to be on this, I think a big component of this is not just getting the medication, right? Because yeah, sure, maybe next year it's going to be more affordable. It's going to be an oral form. It's going to be effective. But in the end, they're still doing the same thing as the drugs are today. And what's happening today is that people are malnourished. They're not watching their protein levels. They're not getting enough nutrition because they are essentially starving themselves. And obviously the body's doing other things with this medication, but people are chronically dehydrated. So I really think it takes professionals, medical professionals, to watch you and follow you on these medications. It's like a blood pressure medication or anything like that. Your doctor has to monitor you, or your nurse practitioner, whoever's taking care of you, and get feedback, because if something's off, then you need to make adjustments, right? And so some people are just getting these online. I know there's websites you can just buy it from.
Oh, yeah.
People don't, like I said, where is it coming from? What's the quality of it? We don't know.
Yeah. And people will give you a prescription. Just you meet them for 5 minutes online, and then they'll give you a prescription.
Sorry,
that was good.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's one thing moving forward too is really there needs to be more assistance and more follow up for patients, because it's going to be so available, and people, it can cause a lot of problems. And even in surgery, I mean, you think of bariatric patients, they don't absorb certain.
They're on a million supplements.
Yes, tons of supplements, yeah. Right? And yes, these medications are not affecting your actual stomach. We're not cutting things out. But because you're malnourished, you're probably not getting a lot of those same vitamins and supplements. And so I think it's super important, especially for surgical patients, to really watch that closely.
Yeah, checking on people's nutrition after a significant weight loss. I mean, it's doing those types of nutrition labs probably isn't a bad idea for people who've lost that much weight on those medications. And I also think a lot of the surgeries that we're going to be doing, seeing as though we're going to have people who are losing significant weight, will be different than the types of surgeries we're necessarily doing now, where it's closer to massive weight loss procedures instead of your standard tummy tuck. You're talking about either a lower body lift or a fleur-de-lis. So I think that those types of surgeries, were typically reserved for the people who have the largest weight loss due to surgical weight loss, I think we're going to start seeing them for people who are on the GLP-1s.
Yeah, 100%.
And I actually, I recently did a fleur-de-lis. I used your neo-umbilicus that you were talking about. And the reason I did it, because she had a big hernia through her belly button. I mean, it was looked like a Vienna sausage coming through. That. So her belly button was definitely toast, because I needed to close off the hernia. But I actually really like the neo-umbilicus, and it wasn't so much for the reasons that I thought I was going to like it, but I think that with the fleur-de-lis, one of the biggest issues is to get a good belly button, and the belly button is everything, right? When it comes to abdominal contouring, I feel like if you can't get a good belly button, you're just kind of sunk. But the issue with the fleur-de-lis, and for folks out there listening, this is the lower incision that you get with a standard tummy tuck, but then you also get the upper incision that runs from the pubic hair all the way up to the rib cage. When you're doing that vertical incision, you're bringing the skin in, which makes it physically want to pull away. So when you have your belly button stock that's sitting there, that skin comes together and unfurls it, widens it, makes it, no matter how small you make it, there's just this new added vector, which is horrible for what your final belly button is going to look like. But when you cut out your native belly button, use extra skin from the flaps that you're bringing and fold them in, not only is there not a scar around the outside of that, but you're actually tagging that skin down to your connective tissue. So it really kind of neutralizes that vector so you don't end up with this like stretched out, super wide belly button. I was like, I know I did that case specifically because she had a belly button hernia, and I'm like, maybe I should do this for everybody for this surgery, because she looked really, really good at a week. We'll see as we move forward, but I think that we'll see more of patients without surgical weight loss getting those types of procedures. So how we continue to improve and dial in those procedures, not just our standard tummy tuck, is really going to define how good we are at our jobs as we continue to move forward as we see more and more of these patients.
Yeah, totally. I think it's good to have all the tools in your tool belt too, and I think it will drive innovation in terms of what we do in plastic surgery. I think trying new techniques and, like I said, ways to better hide scars, better minimize tension. And we're always looking for these things, whether it's new materials, like new sutures we're using, or there's barbed sutures, or, whatever materials they may be. I think it drives innovation in our field. And I think that's one thing that really drew me to plastic surgery, and maybe that goes for you too. I'm Sean, I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't like to do the same thing every single day. Every time you see patients, you're like, okay, this looks really good. What's next? What's going to get us, further down the line, either for a better result or a more controlled result, so you're not surprised for one reason or another, knowing, what is going to happen with the patient and knowing, what's going to get you the most successful outcome consistently. That consistency is really important, because if you can get A+ results, but you're only getting it in like 30% of your patients, and the other 70% are having something that's, bringing the result down, it's like you want to be able to increase the percentage of folks.
Yeah, I think we walk a very fine line, and I think we've talked about this in one of our previous episodes, but, we, as plastic surgeons, you want to deliver, like I said, A+ results. And what does that mean for a patient? Obviously, if they're wanting a tummy tuck, they want ultimate contour, they want hidden scars, they want a beautiful belly button. But to get that, sometimes you really have to push the envelope and kind of walk that edge. If you go a little bit further, a little more aggressive, you're going to have potentially skin necrosis, complications with healing, and all these issues, which makes it complete opposite of what you're trying to achieve, And so I think it's like just this, that's why I love this specialty, because they're just slowly fine tuning it. But everyone is different. So it's not like you have the same human that you're doing the surgery on 100 times to try and perfect it. No, you have just, everyone's totally different. Everyone's skin quality is different. Everyone, everything is so different every time, but you're still trying to find a way for every person to give them an A+ result, like you mentioned. And so
get them to the same point. And people will surprise you either way, right? Every once in a while, you'll have like an older patient where you're like, they're a candidate for the surgery, but I'm not sure that they're going to get like the best possible result given their age or whatever else is going on. And then they'll shock you that they look amazing, heal super, super easily. And then you'll have some patients who are like, okay, this one's going to be, I should be able to knock this one out of the park. And then it's just difficult during the surgery or difficult during the healing. And people surprise you. And I feel like each time you operate on somebody or another patient, you gain these like little bits of data where your brain is telling you like what you can or cannot get away with. And it's this constant balance as you're kind of learning in your experience. It's not just the same surgery you're doing everybody that gives you the same results, which is what patients would love, but it's always a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah, totally.
Now, when you went through your weight loss journey prior to your surgery, you used GLP-1s, correct?
Yeah, I initially diet and exercise, nutrition and exercise, lost about 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. And then I just plateaued. And then around that same time was when GLP-1s were starting to be actually available to us normal people. So, or normal as in like, we're not like celebrities getting it from who knows where. Like, they were getting it for years. But yeah, when I started taking that, and I lost another 10 pounds. So I lost almost 20 pounds. And I posted about it online. You know, it was honestly life-changing for me, you know, because I had done everything I could, I thought. But even when I got to my goal weight, when I'd lost almost 20 pounds, I still had stubborn fat. You know, I'm like, man, I don't want to get thinner, but I still have these areas that I just am retaining fat. You know, as we know, lipodystrophy, you know, fat that acts abnormally, everyone's different. We're all genetically different, and we store it in different areas. And I just happen to store it right in my gut and then in my lower back. You know, a lot of guys do. So that's why I ended up having my high def lipo by Dr. Garlic, my partner, and I've just been happy. But it really took a combination of all those things, right? So it was like nutrition, my exercise, the GLP-1, and then the surgery, kind of the cherry on top.
Yeah. And what was your experience taking the medication, like side effect wise? I mean, I haven't taken them myself, but I hear from patients. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, for me, every time I would get the shot in the beginning, like the next day, I would be super nauseated. Never threw up, but just that feeling of nausea, and I like hate that feeling, honestly. Like, I'm like, can someone give me some Zofran? And actually, I took a Zofran, and it helped quite a bit. But every time in the very beginning when I started taking it, I would take a shot, and then the next day I would feel a little nauseated, but that went away. And then the next most common thing was like, you're just kind of chronically dehydrated because you just kind of don't eat or drink. So I had to make sure I was getting enough water and liquids. And then third, you know, associated with that was constipation. You know, I was like, I'm usually pretty regular. And with that, I just got super constipated. So those are the main three things. I never had any other issues, but you know, for some people, maybe that's a deal breaker. And some people are like, whatever, that's my daily life already. So.
And you were on Mounjaro? Is that what you were on?
Yeah, Mounjaro.
Did you have energy issues? I know that I've talked to a lot of patients. They say that they took a shot and then like the next day they were just done for the day, just like very low energy. Did you have anything like that?
I never experienced that. I run at a very high frequency though, so maybe it just
your energy just overcome anything that Mounjaro could throw at you. Yeah.
I'm like 5 a.m. I'm awake. Let's go. You know, get my 6 hours of sleep. I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious about it myself, but I haven't taken any of them. But I've had so many patients who have been on them, either patients who've either already had surgery or going to have surgery coming up and just kind of dialing things in preparation for the surgery to get their BMI exactly where they kind of want it to be. But it seems very, very common. And it's even not just my cosmetic patients, but you see a lot of insurance patients on it because they have diabetes or whatever else they're on. And I'm seeing more and more of those patients on them. And some people who are now on just that and no longer on insulin or whatever else because they've lost a significant amount of weight that have put them in a place where they don't have to be on, you know, they're not dependent on insulin, which is great.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I think that obviously medical benefits on just aside from the weight loss, there's just so many awesome benefits for patients like that. So
yeah, really I think the question for everybody is, you know, when people are on this for a decade or so, what does that do? Is that all good? Is that fine, or is that not fine? I mean, we don't know yet because we don't have that data.
Yeah,
we'll find out soon enough. So one of the things that I've seen a lot of online, and especially with Ozempic and other medicines for weight loss, is people talking about what to use topically, non-invasively or minimally invasively to help decrease their risk of having lax skin after significant weight loss. Where do you stand on this whole thing? It's like, do you feel like this is snake oil and people are just trying to sell creams? Or do you think that some of these things actually may help patients minimize their lax skin after losing 50, 75, 100 pounds?
I mean, I think some of these devices, like if you're talking devices, you know, non-invasive or minimally invasive devices, I think they on some level can help. But again, you know, I think the rapidity of how quickly people are losing weight on this, I don't know if there's any device that's going to tighten your skin quick enough or build enough collagen or elastin quick enough to overcome that, you know. And I mean, even if you look at women with pregnancy, you know, 9 months, is that how much time is that for their skin? Now their skin will shrink back down, but they end up with stretch marks, and sometimes that skin never contracts, you know. And I mean, there are some great, I think, I wouldn't call it snake oil. It's like the opposite, like elastin, right? Reform and repair, or body transform. It's like clinically been shown to build collagen and elastin. It can be applied to the skin. Someone I know very closely, actually, in her pregnancy, she applied Transform Body to her abdomen the entire pregnancy, every day. And she went to her, and she has 3 other sisters. Their bellies are wrecked. Genetically, she's kind of set up for failure.
Okay, yeah.
They all have stretch marks. So this is just anecdotal, right? It's one person I know closely. But, she went to her OB at like 38 weeks or whatever she was right before her pregnancy. And her OB's like, I've never seen a belly like this. She's like, you need to be like a belly model. Like, your skin is perfect.
It's perfect.
You have no stretch marks. Yeah. She's like, I totally attribute that to putting that cream on every day, building collagen elastin. So, maybe if it is, like, if you're starting your weight loss journey through one of these medications and you get on something like, say, elastin, or you start doing these treatments, whether it's, through any of the Cyton devices or any of these like laser or light devices or microneedling devices, I mean, there may be some benefit, but I just don't think we have like true data to say that it's significantly going to help you, just because this is all new for us, right? All of this weight loss stuff, to this degree.
Yeah. I feel like there is just no cream. I want to go out on a limb here and say it's like there's nothing you can slather on your skin that is going to fix like 75 pounds of weight loss, unless you're like, you have to be very young, right? If you're in your 40s like I am, it's like you can't drop 50 pounds and not have there be significantly excess, in excess skin. Maybe putting on what was the one you're talking about? But it's like if you're yeah, it's like whatever you're putting on. It's like maybe if you did like with and without, there may be a visible difference, right? The pictures may be different if you manage and were capable of multiplying yourself and doing them as a controlled study within yourself. But I feel like even if you're going to have an improvement, it's not going to stop you from needing something more significant if you want it to be smooth, flat, tight. Yeah. It's like when we see people who have lost 50, 75, 100 pounds, most of the time you're not even a good candidate for like minimally invasive stuff like Renuvian, let alone just cream. You need like surgery or at least a hybrid short scar surgery with an energy-based device combined. So the idea that something as simple as, putting on some type of lotion during massive weight loss is going to prevent you from having excess skin just seems impossible to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of this is brought out of, all the fitness stuff on social media where people lose huge amounts of weight and then people see them with seemingly no excess skin, but it's because they're in high-waisted yoga pants, it's tucked away, and then when those people who are on there, show their extra skin, it's like, yeah, I have it, I just hide it away.
Yeah.
You have this idea that people have been watching this person for months or years under the expectation that they lost 100 pounds and they just have like perfect skin afterwards. It's not true. This never has been true. Like, be incredibly rare to find someone who could lose, triple digits and not have excess skin. You would have to have like the best skin ever and be like 16. That's about the only way I could imagine it. But certainly not in your 30s, 40s, 50s. It's like their cream may help, but it's not going to stop you from seeing us.
even if you weren't on these medications and you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you're going to watch your body, your skin all change anyway. Like you said, like every day, like our cells, where everything's turning over, but the quality of our tissue today is probably not as good as it was yesterday, and yes, there are certain creams that can help, but I totally agree with you. I mean, these are drastic changes for patients, and it's great, right? It's awesome. I think it's such a rewarding thing for patients. But yeah, I mean, you're probably going to need skin removal, not just creams.
Yeah, we don't have energy-based devices that can replace us yet. At some point, we will.
No.
At some point, I would imagine that we have energy-based devices that minimally invasively we can enact a super significant change. It's like the devices we have now work a lot better than they worked a decade ago, but they're still not a replacement for excisional surgery.
Totally.
With significant weight loss, facial fat grafting. You don't do a lot of facial surgery, but do you do facial fat grafting?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of facial fat grafting because a lot of times we're harvesting from the body. So I'll do nano fat around the eyelids and certain areas on the face. But I think fat grafting is a great tool in the face. I mean, to your own tissue, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's kind of two reasons why we're going to see a significant increase in facial fat grafting in this year and kind of moving forward. Number one, as we've been talking about, this entire episode, people who are losing significant weight, loss of mid-face volume, which makes people appear hollow and droopy and tired and older. So refilling that. And then with all of the stuff that came out with fillers and migration of fillers, and that fillers aren't just vanishing over 9 months, they're just migrating and going into other places of your face. All of these shocking MRIs that we're seeing where people have 60 cc's of filler like all over their face. I think some of that is freaking people out and having them kind of push away from doing fillers. And if you're looking for a more natural filler, facial fat grafting is certainly a way to go, both for, fine lines and wrinkles, lips. I mean, I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of. And it's interesting because there's been a big change with, plastic surgeons themselves used to do a fair bit of injectables, and that's kind of been passed down to like nurse injectors and PAs and other folks. And now if you're moving back to fat grafting, we're going to be passing that back up, because I don't foresee a situation where you're having, nurse injectors in, small clinics doing fat grafting in the face. I mean, maybe they will. I guess there's nothing to stop them from doing that. But it seems like these patients are going to end up kind of coming back to us after kind of years of them being, handed off to another group, which is interesting.
Well, I think one thing to consider as you talk about, because you kind of think you bring up a point, right? It's like, well, why would they come back to us? Well, it's like, to get the fat, if it's from you, it has to be extracted typically through liposuction. So that's more of a procedural technique, surgical, honestly, but to get that fat and then to put it back into your face, that's why probably a lot of people are not going to be doing that. However, if you look at what's coming now and in the next couple of years, I mean, we know of Renuva, but Aloe Clay by Tiger Aesthetics is a fat-derived, human fat-derived product that has structural components in it. It essentially has no human cells, right? And so you're able to take this material that's both structural and fat in nature, and you can inject this, and this is just off the shelf. So now you're able to, and it gives structure. Fat itself, when we're just injecting the adipocytes and maybe a little bit of the connective tissue, you just don't get the same type of support, especially if you're nano fat, right? You're putting in fat, essentially. But with this material, you're actually structurally able to add structure, and what they claim is that it actually will, tissue will ingrow until you actually will produce your own fat to replace it. And you have the structure. So I think there might be a change in this, even though, like for our own fat, I think it will be surgeons mostly, but I think if this material gets in the hands of a lot of non-physician, non-plastic surgeon providers, I think you might see a lot of that material being used, and I think that's what they're banking on, right? That's what they want as a company. Yeah,
the more they can sell it. Well, and Renuva, that only came in like 3 cc syringes, right? It was a small volume, and it was pretty spendy, right? It was like a good $1,000 for those.
Oh, it's very expensive. Yeah, but if you look at Aloe Clay, the way they've priced it in the market is really comparable to Sculptra, but Sculptra takes several sessions. And you have unpredictable amounts of volume being built, through production of your own collagen by injecting Sculptra. This material, I think it's like even 16 cc's in some of these syringes, so a lot more volume than the Renuva had. So I think that's one maybe quote unquote advantage they might have over Renuva is the volumes, like you're talking about. So things like hip dips, back of the hand, lipo defects. I mean, there's so many applications to this. I think it's exciting again. I think in terms of the breast, though, I'm one of the early adopters for this Aloe Clay, so I have a couple of patients coming up that I'm doing with it, but they won't let us use it on the breast right now. And I think it's good. Like if you don't have enough research, don't put it in a spot where you may potentially develop something to it, right? We're very careful with the breast, so I think, but using in other areas that are safe, like I said, hip dips, and like I think even in the face and the hands, it's safe to use.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see what happens with breast, because with breast augmentation, especially in thinner patients, when they're doing subfascial, even with cohesive gel implants, rippling is still an issue. And it's like, I've had patients who are just rail thin, have, an augmentation, and you've got a little bit of rippling. You're like, I wish I had fat somewhere on your human body that I could take some to put in here to help camouflage some of the rippling, because there's not anything else surgically that we can do. And I feel like these, fat derived kind of human fillers will be helpful in those patients when, of course, it is deemed safe to do so. But even a couple of syringes or a couple of packs at 16 cc's a pop would make a significant difference for someone who's skinny, that you could help cover up rippling. It feels like that would be a good place to utilize that, because that does happen on a fairly regular basis when you just could use a little bit for rippling, but patients just don't have enough fat to track down to give you a significant amount to cover that up.
And I think one thing you could potentially do, with this material, and I've talked to these guys about it at Tiger Aesthetics, but is taking a little bit of fat. So maybe you're like, hey, I can only get 50 cc's or something, right? But you can actually mix it with the material and kind of expand the volume that you're able to inject. Because what they're saying is like, yeah, you have 16 cc's, but because you get your own fat being developed on these things, actually it's more volume than you actually think. So I think it's exciting, like you said. I think for these patients, as we're looking again towards breast preservation, looking to not go under the muscle and cut and do all that stuff. I see this like every week. I have women coming in for consultation. They're dual plane too. Some surgeon did it, and they're pulling into their armpits. They hate it. It feels weird. So I really think the mentality shift is there for the population. And now because of Instagram, they're seeing that, hey, like I can get an augmentation without cutting my muscle. Like, why not? And so I think as we move towards that breast preservation ideal, I think materials like this are going to be necessary, because again, you don't want to trade one problem for another, like you're talking about rippling and things. So, although if you look at the 6th generation Motiva, they claim that because of their monoblock technology, the way their shell and gel is filled, it's one material, so you don't get rippling in these implants, is what they claim. And I've talked to some surgeons outside of the US that have been using them for years now, and they claim they don't have that issue, and they're doing subfascial. They're not even doing internal bra, so I do think it's promising.
Now, what I want for these kind of the fat technology, when in burn victims, when they have like a huge percentage burn, sometimes they'll take a sampling of your skin, send it off to a lab. They will replicate it in a lab to create new skin. They should do this with fat, where it's like I send you like a little sample. You take the adipose-derived stem cells that are out there, and then you can grow out a batch of someone's fat that you could send it back to me that I could utilize in the office. Someone should do that. I feel like it wouldn't be that hard, honestly.
Oh, totally. Well, along these lines, I think you bring up a really good point. It's like, okay, if you don't have enough fat and you need fat, now what do you do? Well, there's, if you look, there's a lot of companies. There's a company out of the UK, actually, that's here in the US now, that does fat banking. They actually will bank your fat. So let's say you're like, hey, I need to lose 75 pounds, 100 pounds on, GLP-1s. Haven't started them yet. You go to your doctor, they essentially go do liposuction on you, take a bunch of fat, and then this fat banking place freezes your fat. Then you lose your weight, and then you're like, I need some fat back, and you get some fat. That's the thought. Or, like you mentioned, the stem cells, right? The adipose-derived stem cells. I think a lot of this is going to drive more of that technology in terms of utilizing stem cells to do whatever. But this is what this like fat banking place is like banking on, essentially.
Well, it's certainly the easiest stem cells to get your hands on. I mean, going through a tiny incision instead of having like a bone marrow biopsy to collect it, which is certainly a much more painful procedure, not as aesthetically pleasing. But I think we're going to see a lot of things as we continue to improve our molecular biology kind of techniques and utilizing fat for other things heading towards the future. Because if it is truly a stem cell, you can use it for a lot of different things. But the idea of like growing in the lab or banking it, I mean, it's interesting. It's all new and very exciting. But you always come across these patients who are like, I was like, I need to do fat grafting for you, but you don't have fat. They're like, well, can I gain weight in preparation for that surgery? I was like, yeah, well, if you gain weight, you can do that surgery. And then when you lose the weight, the fat that we harvested, it just vanishes. So it's not going to help. Not going to help you long term unless you're going to maintain that weight forever, which is just, it's tough for people.
I think another thing to consider, and I think is very fascinating, is, think about that person that comes in and says, I don't have enough fat. But the person sitting next to them, their friend, their spouse, whatever, is like, oh, you can use my fat, right? That's like the most common
Every
thing.
person
like,
says it.
I'll donate my fat, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many fat donors out there that are so willing. It's great. However, as we know, you can't take someone's fat with their living cells in it, tissue, and put it in another human, right? They're going to reject it and have some issues. But I think if you look at technology, like even in plastic surgery with face transplantation, with double hand transplantation, taking essentially an allograft or someone else's tissue, living tissue, putting it in or on your body, right? But also making those tissues and things almost like chimera of like the two people, right? Like, so they do take those stem cells and they put them into these patients. Mm-hmm. And so they're able to tolerate these transplants a lot better. And so the medications they have to take to not reject that tissue is, it's very minimal. But I think as we look forward to the future, I think we'll get there someday where it's like, yeah, like your spouse could donate some fat and whatever, spin it in a bottle, boom, you can inject it. It's not going to cause you any issues, And so, there's just so many aspects to think about all these ways of, again, volumizing after losing weight,
Yeah. There's going to be so many excited family members who get to donate fat.
Yep. Family parties are going to be a totally different thing.
You're like, you get to find out who your favorite aunt is, right? It's like, I'm going with my Aunt Karen. She's like, yes, perfect. So I knew all those Christmas cards I sent you for the last several years are going to work out.
I love it.
Yeah, but I feel like we'll get there eventually. It's just, it's just going to take time. But there's so many exciting things that are kind of coming down the pipe. It's a very exciting time in plastic surgery. It's very cool.
Well, maybe you've seen this recently about these 3D printed breast implants, So I was at a meeting last year in Orange County, and they were talking about essentially biologic or plant-based breast implants that they've been putting in pigs and porcines, and they've been doing these small volumes, but then the body grows into it and becomes your own tissue. They're now doing bigger volumes, but there's also now 3D printed breast implants where the thought is that you fat graft it and your body grows into it. And so there's a lot of just cool technology that's coming around. It's not far away, like you mentioned. Are we going to watch this and then comment, or how are we going to do this?
So I already watched it because I wanted to make sure that it was like something that I felt like we could talk about. But you can watch it. You can watch it and
their first reaction.
Let me see.
4 years ago. If you go to the doctor and address symptoms or problems you've been having, and their first reaction is to try to put you on a new medication and not do any blood work, it's time to go. Pack it up, find a new doctor that actually cares about you as a human being and doesn't look at your problems as dollar signs. I don't think enough people know that you can get your blood work done, no insurance, no doctor, you buy the panel online, schedule the appointment to give the blood, and a week later you have the results in your email telling you what's higher than normal and what's lower than normal. Then, based off the results of your blood work, you can figure out what lifestyle changes you need to make to improve, maybe vitamins or maybe medication. But medication should not be the first thing that your doctor is handing you to fix your problems.
Interesting.
Just skip the doctor, get your own labs.
Yeah.
And then, sure, that is great, right? It's like, that should not be your knee-jerk reaction. And then she flies into get your own labs, get your own lab.
Then she becomes your TikTok doctor and is giving you medical advice and telling you to then, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest issue with all of this is in medical school, they teach you don't order stuff that you don't want the answers to, right? Because you can order a bunch of labs and if they're not indicated, you can come across something that's not at all in any way important, and now you have to go down this rabbit hole to figure out what's going on with this one random thing. So the idea that someone with zero medical training is just going to go on labwork.com or whatever select whatever complete array of labs, because they're not going to know which ones to order. They're going to order all of them, or as many as they feel like they need to afford. And then they're going to get answers on the back end. Now, the question is, what do you do with that information, and how are you going to enact a game plan, right? It's like you can't just look that you have like a low blood count and understand what that necessarily means. Like what supplement, what lifestyle change, what anything is going to necessarily fix that, especially when you see so many patients who freak out about labs that I'm like, don't even worry about that number, because that number does not matter, because this other number is fine. You only worry about this number if this other one's off, but they don't have that information. So then they're going to freak out about whatever small thing they have. When I started watching this, I'm like, this is a cleverly disguised ad. Like this is what this is screaming to me. I was like, this lady is involved with a lab work company.
She owns, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And when you look at the caption on the bottom, it's like, oh, this is the place where I go, but you can get it wherever. I'm like, okay, there it is. That was the whole point of this whole thing. Skip the doctor, get labs at this place. I'll make money off it. It's like 100%. She's either got paid for that or is getting something in the back end. I feel like I can't imagine. Yeah. I like can't see it any other way.
One thing I've thought about a lot with this is, you know, like our place as physicians and us as surgeons, but like as physicians in general, like, you know, with AI becoming more and more able to look at algorithms and synthesize data on a level that as humans we probably cannot achieve, you know, but as you look at like ChatGPT 5 coming out and its capabilities compared to what's out right now, ChatGPT 4, like it's good, but it's scary, right? Because I think maybe a person does get their labs and they put the numbers into ChatGPT and it just says, hey, and it just tells you like, actually, you know, based off of your age, and it knows you, right? Because ChatGPT gets to know you as your person. It's like, maybe you should look at these things, and maybe it'll refer to your doctor. But I do wonder if AI on some level can be an assistant, right? And maybe it assists physicians and providers and offloads them some of this type of work. But I think we're still far from that. But, you know, I think the capabilities of what it can do, I mean, there's all these studies out there. It's like, oh, you know, AI was better able to predict, you know, on this radiographic imaging, could see on a mammography more breast cancer than the human eye could from a radiologist, you know, who's done it for 30 years. Like, there's all these studies out there that talk about this, but like, what's the practical application in something like this? And that's what I see. And it may be, you know, 3 to 5 years from now, but I do think that it'll be able to offload us. And so, yeah, we'll still order the labs and we'll have to do the medications if it's right, if it's the necessary thing. Mm-hmm. But I do think, you know, AI can be used. I think about it a lot as like a calculator back, you know, when they invented the calculator. It's like before that, the guys were sitting there with their freaking abacus, you know, calculating things. That's fine. They're good at it. But it's like, you're not going to be getting what you're getting on a calculator, right? And so we can use a calculator. The calculator didn't replace mathematics, but it enhanced what we could do and learn. Yeah. And so I hope that AI, we could use it that way, right?
Well, you need to know what to put into it, and you need to know how to interpret what comes out. And I understand this whole lab work thing that this reel is coming from, right? It's like doctors, especially primary care, are pressured for you to see patients super duper quick. So you come in, you're like, hey, I've got wrist pain. And they're like, cool, we'll put you on this medication, beat it. Like that's all the time I've got for you. And I understand it's like they want to have that connection and time and extra effort put in to make sure that they're not missing anything and make sure that you're, you know, getting everything that needs to be done to truly work up the problem. But I don't think the fix to that is to get rid of the doctor entirely and do it completely on your own. You're like, well, I got all day to do it, so I'll just make it happen. Yeah. You know, Google some stuff, go on, you know, whatever the lab workplace that she was touting on there. I don't think that's the fix to the problem. It's like the fix to the problem is allowing our doctors, especially primary care, to have more time to actually spend time with their patients, listen to the issues, figure out what's going on, and find out a good way to not only diagnose the problem, but treat it in the most appropriate way without just launching medications at people.
Yeah.
I also didn't like the fact that she said that that's how they make money. They're just like, to make money by giving you medication. I was like, that is not how we.
Like, I wish I made money off it. Like what?
That is not how that works.
The way of like drug companies paying doctors to use their medications, like that's so gone. Like Sunshine Act, all this stuff, like we can't. Like just that's not how it is. I've never seen that ever.
Well, even in the like heyday of drug reps or tech reps taking doctors out to like go golfing in Bermuda for like 2 weeks, all these like crazy trips and cruises and dinners out and all that. Even then, the doctors were not getting paid more. They were just trying to influence you into using their medications because they were giving you stuff to make you either feel bad or just constantly being there with you. So you were thinking like, oh, I should use Acifex instead of what other, PPI medication because I have a stapler from them on my desk. Mm-hmm. But even then you weren't getting kickbacks and payment from it. And especially not now when everything is tracked from start to finish. It's a very different time now, but it's like we do not make money based on what we're using. It's not how that works.
Nope.
It's like if you're a part of the company, then you have to disclose it, which is another thing entirely.
Yes. Yep, for sure.
Oh. All right. We have anything else about this video?
No.
I was let down so quickly on that one. I feel like out of the gate I was like, yeah, she's right. Don't just launch medications at people. And then jumped into lab work. I'm like, okay, I'm back out. And like really, she lost me quick.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm like, when she started saying all that stuff about ordering her labs, I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah, but she had it like down in it was like in the caption on the bottom. It's like, this is where I get mine done. Like, there it is. I knew it. And I feel like spending more and more time on social media in general and also just posting more, seeing what other people are posting. Unless you're pretty savvy at social media, it is hard to differentiate something that is true to something that is like being pushed out as truth because it's an ad. And that is tough because you see people, especially like, my older patients who are on Instagram, like, oh, I saw this thing on Instagram. I'm like, that is 100% false. Like, I don't know who this person is. They're not a doctor. They happen to be wearing a white coat, right? This is an ad for whatever medication or device or whatever it may be. But it's just getting increasingly hard to differentiate the two unless you have like very detailed knowledge. So it's got to be super tough for patients to be able to suss that out.
Well, what's really concerning to me is plastic surgeons in our own specialty who are essentially trading surgery or doing these collaborations with, influencers for surgery because, they know that an influencer, just like an advertisement for a product, right? If they talk about it, like you said, and they don't disclose the details of it, their audience is going to eat it up. And that's like, hey, let's go to these surgeons, and they're making them sign NDAs to say, okay, like you have to post so many times if we're going to, cover the cost of your surgery.
And only say nice things.
No, seriously. Yes. And so only say nice things. You have to do it for a year. And so now, like, even if they're not happy, they're getting revisions at other surgery practices. They can't talk about it. They cannot disclose legally, because of what they signed. They're afraid, right? They don't want to get sued by the plastic surgeon or whatever. So now other patients don't know this and are then going to these practices and then paying, right, in full and not knowing about this. And then that to me is just, it brings in this whole ethical issue. And I really think as a society, like the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, ASAPs, like we really need to update our policies on that because we're in an era, like I said, where we have these tools or we're just right in people's hands all the time on their phones. We're able to reach them. And if we're not disclosing that, hey, this is a paid partnership with this influencer, we did their surgery at no charge, he or she has to say positive things. Like, they're not disclosing that. And, I don't know. I do know that it does happen quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't agree with it at all.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great, especially within you're looking at the ethics in plastic surgery. It doesn't feel awesome. And I think that where the current bylaws now, it's like in that situation where you have an influencer working with a plastic surgeon, the plastic surgeon themselves is not violating any bylaw that we currently have, although it should be updated. We're just slow to make changes. But the influencer themselves, if they're not disclosing that they're in a paid partnership, that's actually against like the FCC
FTC guideline.
FTC's guideline.
It's a law. It's a federal law. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the question of whether that is, enforced or not, which is a totally different thing. But yeah, I feel like these tie-ins with influencers is becoming so significant on so many levels with so many different companies that it's only natural that plastic surgeons would get wrapped up in this, because you have, influencers reach out, and I've had people ask me for discounts for, they're like, well, I am a micro, nano, macro, whatever size influencer they are in the greater Portland area. And they're like, do you do, discounts for people? I'm like, for that? Absolutely not. It's like, that is off the table. It's like, if you have a great experience, awesome. I would love for you to share, but we're not exchanging, a significant discount for trying to draw people in, because it puts you in the sticky situation where you've paid them. You feel like you should, not paid them, but given them a discount. You feel like they owe you regardless of what their situation is. And for me, I just want people to be genuinely happy and feel comfortable to share. And if they don't feel comfortable to share, that's fine too. You don't have to scream my name from the highest rooftops, but I would rather you just be happy without having to pretend to other people that you are. It's just, it feels grimy. It doesn't feel good.
Well, I think, like you said earlier, like even that lab, the thing we just watched about the labs, like it doesn't feel authentic. Like we can sniff out BS and fake, or if someone's pushing a product, so yeah, if you have a patient who essentially you've traded for and they haven't paid and they're being forced to do it because they signed a thing, right? Like that comes off as fake. Like people can see that. I do think at the same time. So I mean, earlier we kind of talked about what's confusing, and I do think it is, but I think if it's not authentic, like you said, if it's not your real patient's emotions and they're like, hey, expressing this on their own, like I think people can pick it up too. But it's dangerous. It's scary.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with how much time people spend in that space of like what feels real and what feels different. I feel like, especially coming into Instagram, it's like I didn't really use Instagram that much until like 2 years ago. And when you first come in, it feels like such a new and different place. It's hard to suss out like what is for you, what feels real, what doesn't feel real, what is good content, what people are going to really be attracted to. It just takes like time to figure that out. And some patients, especially at older age, it just probably won't figure that out. So I feel like they're more susceptible to these types of misinformation and hidden ads and things with people with, hidden agendas, that it's a little tougher to differentiate from just, face-to-face conversation you're having with somebody. Because, it may look like you're FaceTiming with somebody when you're looking at their reel, because it's like, it's on your phone. It feels like they're personally talking to me. But, it's when there's hidden agenda behind it, it makes it a little bit dangerous in some ways.